right, let's zoom in now into what transpired in the various provinces when it comes to the voting in of the Premier and the election of the Premier in various provinces in the country. And for more on this and analysis, we're now joined by Director of Centre for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at the Nelson Mandela University, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, and he joins us now via our video link. Prof, I mean, one would say that when you look at the various provinces, the biggest story really coming out from today, one would say, is Kwazulu-Natal, and seeing the election there of course, Nduli as the Premier for KZN.
Yes, good evening, my sister, and good evening to your viewers. You are absolutely right. With the other provinces, it was almost a foregone conclusion as to what the end result will be. Look at the Eastern Cape, for example, with Oscar Maweano. Look at the Western Cape with Ellen Winde. Look at Gauteng with Panyaza Lesotho and so on and so forth, with a few changes, of course, here and there. But in the case of KwaZulu-Natal, what makes the province so interesting is that the MK party had the majority of votes, getting 45%, and then, of course, getting 37 seats of the 80 seat the provincial legislature. And then, of course, the second one coming too far, but only to find that at the end, the MK party will be pushed to the opposition benches. Unfortunately, that is the nature of politics. If you don't have an outright winner, although that in itself is still questionable on the side of the MK party, because they feel that something untoward happened. But then, of course, that is a matter for the courts to decide. Given what we have right now and given what has just happened, which you alluded to, is that Mr. Nduli is now officially the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal. And it's not because this is what the people of KwaZulu-Natal wanted. I heard him in his speech saying that the 55% of the people of KwaZulu-Natal did not vote for the MK party.
Yeah.
Factually, that is correct, but analytically, that is flawed. The understanding here is that the majority of the people in KwaZulu-Natal voted for the MK and wanted the MK to lead. Unfortunately, the minority coalition has then given the premiership to Mr. Nduli. It's not his fault. It's the nature of politics.
And I was coming there, Professor. You know, one would say that looking at those earlier remarks saying that at least 55% of the people of KZN didn't vote for the MK party, and it was indeed that 45% in which we saw. And one would say that, you know, what do you make of such comments, especially during a time like this, where especially those who are in the legislature today from the MK party now disputing some of the votes?
You know, my sister, the problem here is that we did not follow due processes as a country in this election. The way we should have done it was that we should have had the election, at the conclusion of which all contestants, including both political parties and independent candidates, should have been afforded an opportunity to fill in the Section 55 forms, which they did. And 26 of the political parties that contested the election indicated that there was something untoward in as far as they are concerned that happened during the election, either immediately after the election or during the capturing of the marks, claiming that some of the marks they had from the slips that were deposited to be captured and the marks that were reflected on the boards, the two did not meet. And then, of course, some people from other provinces had similar concerns would have seen that outside Parliament today, there were a number of political parties, not just the MK party, that raised concerns, saying that there are certain things that did not go well. So if we had listened to those Section 55 concerns and had addressed them before announcing the results, I don't think that there would have been so much concern. The concern arises because people are saying that we followed the law, we filled the forms that needed to be filled, but then we're not listened to. Therefore, we are taking the matter up. Once the IEC has announced the election results, then the matter is out of the IEC's hands. Then the next point of call will be the electoral court. Then if you fail, you go all the way to the constitutional court. But then what do you do in the interim? That is where then there will be divergence of opinions as to whether you comply and complain, or you complain and then comply later. So that is a subject for debate at the moment.
And Professor, when you look at the developments coming out from today, particularly looking at what transpired in KwaZulu-Natal, what does this all mean now for the MK party, who really does have the majority but not an outright majority?
The simple answer, my sister, is that these results mean that with the other parties having come together, making 41, the MK party has 37. If, say, the EFF were to give the MK party its 2 seats, it would still have 39, and then 39 is less than 41. So it means that the parties that have come together are now the majority. Then it means that unless there is a coalition at a provincial level, then it means that the MK party will be pushed to the opposition benches against the will of the people who voted in the majority. But the statement that Mr. Ntuli was making, factual in terms of numbers, he was absolutely correct. But analytically, that was not correct because it's 45% for the MK party alone. And you only make the other 55 if you bring all the other parties together that are part of the collective. So that is where the difference is. So in the broader scheme of things, therefore, it means that the majority of the people in KwaZulu-Natal voted for the MK party. But then because of this arrangement, then it means that those parties that came together were able to have more votes collectively than the 37 seats that the MK party has, and therefore they become the majority. Hence, the election of Mr. Ntuli as the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal.
And Professor Mngomezulu, let's move on now to what we saw in Limpopo, and of course that's the election of the first female Premier there, Popi Ramathuba. What do you make of that?
No, it's something to be commended, my sister, I must say, because we have always been saying that if you look at States SA, whenever they give you the numbers, they'll tell you that South Africa is more women than men. But unfortunately, that does not translate into women being the majority in many of the structures, including, of course, public structures like, or public institutions like government, be it national or provincial level. So what has happened in Limpopo is something to be commended. In fact, I'm on record when President Cyril Ramaphosa was appointing Judge Zondo to be the Chief Justice. I was saying that he missed an opportunity to make history of appointing Mandela Maya, who had been recommended to be the person topping the list, who would have been the first Chief Justice in South Africa under the new political dispensation. That part of history then missed, or the President missed that boat. But this time around, the province of Limpopo has made history by making sure that a woman becomes the Premier, which means that this is someone who's been in the political terrain for some time. It's not as if we are just doing her a favor. She deserves to be in that position, and she should be congratulated for that.
And of course, when you look at, the government of national unity and it now also filtering through to provinces, and some might even say even towards some of our municipalities. I mean, in Gauteng, we saw there the re-election or the election and the return and the retaining position of Panyaza Lesufi. He gets to retain his position as a Premier. And of course, one would say it is because of the broader scale of this government of national unity.
My sister, there is something that South Africans have to know, because I've been listening to a number of people conflating issues that are not supposed to be conflated. They are talking about government of national unity on the one hand, they are talking about coalitions on the other, and at times they use these two terms interchangeably. Then they compare also what is happening now and what happened in 1994. Those two are not the same. In 1994, we had a clear constitution, the interim constitution of 1993, which was crafted carefully so under the then political dispensation, making sure that we had to push the reconciliation agenda, which is why then we ended up, of course, having the first and second deputy presidents. Something that is not an issue now because our current constitution does not cater for that. So that is just one thing. Then we have this government of national unity. The government of national unity means that you look at the parties that are represented in the National Assembly, if it's at a national level, and then you allocate positions, basically you co-govern with them. But then if you come to a coalition, I can be in coalition with Party Y, And if we are both number one and number two, or number 1, 2, 3, that is called a grand coalition. It's a coalition of bigger parties. Then we have another form of a coalition, which is a minority coalition, the one we're talking about in the case of Kwazulu-Natal, where we have smaller parties coming together and then ousting the party that is the majority. If we were to do the same at a national level, the ANC currently, it didn't make 50+1, but it has the highest number of votes, and therefore it means that it is the bigger party. Then we have the second party, the DA, then we have the MK party. If we were to form a grand coalition, you will be bringing together those three or those two, then that will be a coalition government. Now, if you talk about a government of national unity, then you bring in more parties than just the top two or the top three. I think that South Africans must understand the distinction between the two and then understand it correctly.
And when it comes to, what we've seen today, and particularly what we've seen in the National Assembly, as well as what we've seen now in the various provinces, do you think that, this will sort of destabilize some of, the coalitions we have at a municipal level? Do you think that it has a potential to see what you are also talking about, this grand coalition that may infiltrate into our municipalities?
I'm glad my sister asking that question, and I'll answer it in two ways. One, the decisions that have been taken by politicians in this particular election will come back to haunt them sooner than later. Firstly, watch the space. There will be resignations in some municipalities, and then there will be by-elections, and then watch who's going to win those elections. Then come 2026, there are two things that are likely to happen. One, some voters would say it's pointless for me to vote because I vote for Party X and then Party X decide to go and work with Party Y without my consent, and therefore I'm not voting. Then we start complaining about voter apathy. Then the second scenario is you will have people who will not vote for their own political parties as a way of punishment. They will say, we voted for you in confidence, and then you decided to take our vote, and then we went next door with our vote without our permission. And then, of course, it means that those politicians who have taken certain decisions have a responsibility to go back to their constituencies and explain to them why they took certain positions, so that at least they are in sync with what the people are thinking and what the politicians are thinking. Failure to do so will mean that come 2026, people will be crying. And then these so-called government of national unity arrangements or these so-called coalitions will definitely come back to haunt politicians, and there will be a point of no return. Some political parties, in fact, might gradually fade away as a result of the decisions they've taken in this particular election.
And Prof, I mean, you speak about that, and going into the 2024 elections, the May 29 polls, I mean, we saw the likes of the DA campaigning, saying that save South Africa from the ANC, and now the signing of this, of course, a GNU. One would say that what does it make now of the DA somehow being in a coalition of some sort with the ANC, where it was campaigning, saying, let's save South Africa from the ruling of the ANC?
You know what, my sister? The reason why I'm laughing, you just reminded me of Babundawen Mahlang of Mpumalanga, was the premier in Mpumalanga. He once made a very profound statement, which was factually correct, but then, of course, he was called into the corner and said, comrade, you don't say this thing. He said it's normal for politicians to lie, and it was a fact. And not all politicians, but the majority of them lie. They know that, they lie. They will tell you that they're going to build 50 houses, they build 2, or if you're lucky. Otherwise, they won't build anything until on the eve of the next election, they build one house and say, if you give us a fresh mandate, we are going to build the remainder plus 100 more, which is also not true. In this case, if you take the likes of Estienisen, at one point he said, the DA will never work with the EFF. It will never work with the ANC. In fact, we are prepared to make sure that we bring the ANC below 50%, and then we can work with any other political party, referring to what was called the Moonshot Pact, which later became the Multi-Party Charter for South Africa. So this clique of political parties, their primary intention was to bring the ANC below 50%. And then on top of that, he then started making statements that were really unwarranted. Now he has to eat the humble pie and go to the same people he called thieves, that is the ANC, the same people he said they are corrupt, and he said, like we just alluded, he said we are going to save South Africa, saving it from the ANC. Now, if you are working with the ANC, which has been trained, I know in your own articulation, has been training the country down the drain or pulling the country down the drain, are you then saying to us that you are also an accomplice to the crime? Because that is a statement that is made. But then politicians are good at somersaulting. You would have heard him saying that what they are doing is in the interest of the country. What a nice lie. It's in the interest of the country. The reality is in their own interest, not in your interest, not in my interest. Because people who voted for the DA had a clear agenda of what they wanted to do, which is what their leader told them. We want to save this country from the ANC. And then there was also a conflicting statement between Steenhuisen and Helen Zille. Steenhuisen was saying he's not going to work with the parties I've just mentioned. On the other hand, Helen Zille was saying, we are ready as the DA, we are ready to work with the ANC in order to prevent a coalition of the ANC and the EFF and the MK party, what they called a doomsday coalition. And all of a sudden, they are part of the same party that they said they don't want to align themselves with. Then tell me that politicians are truthful. I would say, 100% no. They are good at telling lies. And sometimes if you tell a lie several times, it sounds like the truth because we have heard it several times. This is one of the realities of history.
And of course, Professor, one would say that when it comes to the general, of course, the GNU, and that's the Government of National Unity, its first test in that regard will be what the EFF presented today in the National Assembly. And of course, bringing that issue again up of an impeachment process, as well as bringing the issue of Phala Phala. This will be a test, right, for those in that, one would say, coalition.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, people say I hate the president, especially those who are lazy to think. They say I hate the president, and my response has always been, I have no reason to hate the president. Similarly, I have no reason to like the president. My responsibility as a South African is to respect the president because he did not elect himself, and to respect the position that he holds. And I still maintain that position. But the reason why I'm saying this is because there is one thing I commend the president for, that is President Ramaphosa. When the Phala Phala issue came out in the open, and it was clear that there was nothing you could defend in that issue, regardless of the fact that some state institutions cleared him. And then Parliament also said, no, there is nothing wrong with what the president, which was all lies, by the way. The president did something very honorable. He realized that this was bad reputation for him as a person, bad reputation for the ANC, bad reputation for the country. What did he do? He resigned. And then the party said, no, comrade, don't resign. We have the numbers in parliament. If they invoke Section 89, we are going to defend you. Indeed, that is what they did. But then the question is, to what extent to the party, and to what extent to the presidents, and to what extent to the country? Look at what has happened now. For the very first time in history, the ANC got 40%. Are there no links between those two? My answer is yes, there is a link between the two. Had they allowed the president to resign at that time, then his hands would not be dirty that the ANC got below 45% under his leadership. Although, of course, we cannot blame this solely on him, but because he also started it by saying there were 9 wasted years, meaning that he was blaming an individual, his predecessor. Then people are going to come back and say, Mr. President, for the very first time in history, the ANC got below 45% under your leadership, and that is something that you cannot erase, whether you like it or not. So the last point then is, when you look at the GNU, how will they vote if the Phala Phala matter comes back? Will the ANC still have the same numbers? you will be the person to answer that question, not me.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time this evening. That's Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, Director of Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at the Nelson Mandela University.